What did they find at the bottom of Lake Mead? If you've watched mob flicks, then you must have heard the phrase, "sleeping with the fishes, yeah, see?" What this means is simple. Mobsters dump the bodies of their victims in the river and leave them there as fish food. Well, the same might have happened years back at Lake Mead. Yep, bodies have been found popping up from the lake, and while it may not be related to a mob hit, it certainly is strange. Keep watching this video to find out more. What you need to know. The retreating waters of Lake Mead exposed long-lost human remains, but who are they? No one knows for now. Although human remains have generated controversy, authorities claim that the true issue is the declining water level brought on by the climate problem. The initial discovery of human remains at Lake Mead happened one after another in fast succession. The massive bathtub ring that served as a reminder of the harsh drought in the West and the dwindling number of recreational alternatives made the environmental catastrophe taking place at the largest reservoir in the US already difficult to ignore. Nonetheless, the bodies were a somber new indicator of the predicament. Unsettling discoveries came to light when water levels dropped to unprecedented lows from May to October. Around the lake, at least 5 sets of remains were discovered. One of the bodies was discovered inside a barrel by a couple who were boating close to a harbor. Less than a week later, 2 sisters on paddleboards uncovered a jawbone in the sand. Then, a family out for a picnic in July came across some partial skeleton bones buried in muck near the shore. Officials are currently working diligently to identify the deceased. Although that would take a lot of effort, being that the remains have been there for at least a decade. A team of detectives, medical examiners, support personnel, and consultants have been attempting to find solutions to the cases that have captivated people all over the world since the first set of remains was found last spring. The Clark County coroner, Melanie Rouse, stated, "We strive to identify these folks by every feasible effort we can put forward. Their job is difficult though. The first set of the bodies, which date back as far as the 1970s, were only skeleton remnants after some of the victims were submerged for years. It's extremely hard to determine who the bones belong to and what happened, now that so many years have passed. The first instance was a homicide involving a victim who was shot and thrown into a barrel. But in other cases, like drownings, it is nearly impossible to determine the exact cause and manner of death. One individual, a man suspected to have drowned but whose cause of death was ruled unknown, has been officially recognized by officials. However, they are still investigating the other instances. It gets more difficult every time there's a gap between the moment of death and the period of recovery, according to Rouse. A long-time mob hit? Boaters enjoying Lake Mead's crystal clear waters on a Sunday in May heard a scream coming from the shore as they made their way back to the dock. After further investigation, they discovered a rusted metal barrel stuck in the muck next to a busy boat ramp. They could make out garments, a shirt, a belt, and what they later identified as human remains inside. The fact that the man's clothes and footwear were still present allowed authorities to establish that the man was shot between the middle of the 1970s and the beginning of the 1980s. The barrel was partially covered in muck, but the lake was much higher when it was dumped in. The barrel was about 100 feet underwater and a few hundred yards from the shore. The victim was shot in the head execution style and packed into the drum, which, according to the local mob museum, was historically a mob practice for disposing of bodies. This is why the killing had all the makings of a gangland hit, according to the museum. Widespread attention was sparked by that case, and the additional bones that were discovered in the lake were frequently noticed by families out on the water. It has frequently been forgotten that the cases don't necessarily have much in common other than the environmental crisis that exposed them, according to Michael Green, a history professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. When you add the idea of discovering human remains, people become interested, according to Green. Organized crime, is an interesting and significant topic anywhere, but Las Vegas has such an association with the subject that just makes it even more fascinating, he added. It's not being acknowledged enough how dangerously and precipitously the lake has dried out. The barrel was only revealed due to a drought that has affected the area for almost 20 years. The lake has been depleted, drying out tributaries, endangering hydropower output, and restricting boat ramps as a result of a punishing dry period in the Colorado River Basin that has been accompanied by excessive extraction, intense heat, and diminished snowpack. The lake, which provides 25 million people with essential water, is only 26% filled and at its lowest since 1937, when it was first filled. Large areas of Lake Mead have been exposed by the receding water levels, exposing old towns and long-lost artifacts, including a boat from the Second World War in addition to the dead. The identification procedure. The popular lake's shore, which welcomed more than 7 million tourists last year, is where the Clark County coroner's work begins. According to Rouse, investigators will gather all evidence they can and work to determine any distinguishing characteristics from the body, clothing, and other facts. The method is the same with skeletal remains, like the 4 other sets found in the lake this year, but more challenging because there aren't often obvious physical clues, according to Rouse. When the scene investigation is finished, the remains are taken to the coroner's office for a medical evaluation. This evaluation may include an autopsy, radiographs, and in some cases, meetings with forensic dentists, forensic anthropologists, and specialty radiologists. Investigators try to gather DNA along the route that can be used to authenticate the bodies. A missing person report is still necessary though, so that investigators have somebody to compare the data with after all that work. Then, the question of what happened to the victims whose remains were discovered still needs to be answered by investigators. The Clark County Coroner's Office regularly deals with the remains found in deserts, mountains, and bodies of water like lakes, and each environment presents a unique set of difficulties. According to Jennifer Burns, a forensic anthropologist and professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who has collaborated with the coroner's office, bodies left in the water can be exposed to numerous scavengers, and the currents can move certain pieces of the body away. Burns speculated that once someone went missing upstream, their body might be found in the lake, which serves as a final resting place. Yet, when only a skeleton is left, it isn't always possible to determine the cause of death, even after the remains have been recognized. Bones are not as informative as a full body when there is soft tissue, organs, and skin, according to Burns, unless of course there has been some sort of harm. One set of bones has been correctly identified by the coroner's office team as belonging to Thomas Ernst, a 42-year-old who vanished in the water in 2002 while taking his family on a lake cruise at midnight. The reason and manner of Ernst's death are unknown, but it is thought that he drowned. After 20 years, his family has expressed their relief at the long-awaited retrieval and identification of his remains and extended their appreciation. Rouse added, "That's one of the reasons why we continue to do what we do, to be able to provide closure and to be able to return these nameless persons to their families and give them a name." The lake is expected to continue dropping, and this will in turn bring additional findings to the surface. And as the water keeps dropping, who knows what might be found next? Many who have followed Lake Mead closely anticipate more attention being paid to the problem that led to the revelations. The forensic anthropologist Burns added, "It's a huge body of water that's disappearing at a rapid rate, so I would not be surprised to see more." It's not strange that most people are concentrating on the bodies individually rather than the crisis that the entire planet is facing. Of course, the cause of the depleting water in Lake Mead needs to be determined and fixed. But at the same time, the bodies that have been buried deep inside it also have to be recovered, identified, and taken back to their families. If not for anything else, at least for the sake of closure and a proper burial. Thanks for watching.